All right, everybody, welcome to Badass Banking. It's another exciting episode today, and I've got my cheesesteak background up because I've got some Philadelphia guys on the line today from the Travillian Group. How you guys doing?
Doing well,
Doing
Brian.
great now. But
So
you're
that's-
reminding me I haven't had a cheesesteak in a long time.
Well, I'm in Virginia. These are not good cheesesteaks down here, just so you know. Not good at all. No good Italian food in Southern Virginia. So, Brian, you're up in the Philadelphia suburbs. Is that right?
Yeah, our office is based out of King of Prussia, which you may have heard of being a Philly guy yourself.
Yep, very much.
Keith is actually in the office right there, and I'm here in near Reading in Pottstown, PA.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Office.
My wife went to Albright.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
right up here.
Yeah, and Customers Bank was out of Wyomissing. I don't know if it still is.
Yeah, they still have their, I believe, an executive office there in Phoenixville, which is Keith's hometown.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we'll start with you, Brian. You're not related to Mike Love from the Beach Boys, right?
Never heard that before.
Never, yeah, I never heard that. I think
Or
there's
Courtney, for that matter, Courtney Love.
Oh yeah, that's a shame. Tell me a little about the company. Why don't we start with you, Brian?
Yeah, certainly. So I joined about 5 years ago, but I'll take you back a little further. Back in '98, Travillian was kind of born out of SNL Financial, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we became the recruiting arm for SNL Financial, spun off independently about 10 years later, but with that giant, database and network, it kind of came with us. We got to know every CFO, CEO, and investment banker, regulators, consultants, you name it, attorneys. We primarily were doing search with the FIG groups in the investment banks. And then we decided, hey, we should probably think about helping their clients, which are the community banks and credit unions all around the country. So about 10 years ago, we started doing executive search, referred in by a lot of investment bankers. Really strategic searches, recapitalizations, some de novos. I came in about 5 years and kind of took us from 0 to 60. Keith joined us about a year back, and we really focused primarily on fast growth, progressive financial institutions, credit unions, and community banks.
Is there such a thing?
There are, yeah. It's a small minority, but they're out there.
They are, and I was only kidding, but they are.
I know, yeah. Oh, certainly, and I guess I'll just kind of finish by saying, we work with, like I said, de novos, recaps. The 0 to 5 billion is kind of the sweet spot, but really, we've got clients. Center State Bank was a great client of ours, all the way up to 20, 40 billion. But the community bank space is our bailiwick. We love this space. I was a community banker for 10 years. I mentioned that to you before the call, and it's in my blood. And so the last thing I'll say, is we want to make sure that banks don't become like this franchise, which is Blockbuster Video.
No block, but I think the last one finally closed in Alaska, of all places, like last year, if I recall.
It was a way of life, going into those places. I worked there back in the day, too.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
that's probably a story. That's a story in itself. So you head up the depository search and the community bank advisory group, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And Keith, you head up the really executive search, right?
So I work with Brian. So Brian heads up our department. I come at it from a different angle, actually. I came up through corporate finance, mostly in New York City. Actually met Brian at my first job after college at SEI Investments in Oaks. Hadn't seen each other for probably 15, 17 years. And I actually had switched over to recruiting at that time at Robert Half. And Brian asked if wanted to come over to a fast growth, more boutique firm, more specialized. I jumped at the idea, loved the culture, loved the fast growth entrepreneurial spirit of it. So I've worked for companies in the past that were those dynamic, innovative companies, leaders who wanted to change, use data analytics, bring in new technology, reach the customer. So when I came on board to work with Brian, we did see few and far between community banks that were at that level. of where they had to be. And a lot of banks, that, as Brian was saying before, that just might be on that path to innovation or might need a little push. We're trying to help in many ways with them. And I love the community banking sector. I love small business. I want to see these small community banks thrive and survive. I don't want to be surrounded by Bank of America out there.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And there's a huge need for what you guys are doing. And the banks, you know, it's not necessarily that they need the push, they need the guidance, right? And they need someone,
Yes.
they need a partner they can lean on ultimately. You know, I actually put something on LinkedIn today about the vendor mentality versus the partnership mentality. And if you're a vendor and act like a vendor, you know, you're probably not going to survive. Or if you're a banker that treats a vendor like a vendor, you're not going to get the big bang for the buck that you really need to get the most out of them. Mm-hmm. So Brian, or Keith, actually, I'll ask you this. So in light of what's going on with COVID and in light of what's going on with digital disruption in your talent searches,
Mm-hmm.
be it, you know, C-level or anything under C-level, are you seeing any, you know, changes in expected competencies from the hiring managers that are looking to recruit?
It's interesting, Brian. Back in March, we were rolling along, 5, 6, 7 C-level searches. Everything was kind of paused. Everybody took a deep breath. The first month, as you know, was kind of punch drunk, just trying to figure out what was happening.
It was a triage. It was a triage period.
It was kind of save the patient, and then we moved along to PPP. And we're getting to that point now that we're starting to talk strategy again with a lot of our clients. Brian and I kind of, and I to all the people we talk to, a lot of them you know out there, the innovative leaders, there's really 3 tranches of banks. There's the innovative banks, the Radius, the Quantic banks, MVBs, the Chimes of the world. Then you have the banks that get it and are moving in that direction, whether it be in the Northeast, Ocean First comes to mind, Carney Bank comes to mind. They get it, they're investing, they're moving in that direction. Then there's that third tranche that doesn't really believe that there's a seismic shift going on out there. Those are the banks. We do help them a lot with, I like to call it the offensive line positions. I'm a big sports fan. Risk, audit, compliance, but they need to bring in some of that, you know, the running quarterback, the fast wide receivers. And I know you watched our webinar a couple weeks ago with Patrick Sells, Jill Castilla, Jason Hendricks, and Ron McDaniel. That's the mindset that we're trying to partner with, but also get that information to the banks that are looking to become the Quantics of the world.
Right.
So it's tough.
Yeah, it is. But you know, I applaud you for trying to bring a little more badassery to the banking industry.
Exactly.
That's what this is all about. You know,
Badassery.
I've been doing this since 1986, and it's the financial services industry is so commoditized. You know, it's hard to get them to adapt to change. I feel like now they're finally getting it. And you know, there's some fintechs out there that are partnering with the banks. The banks are embracing them. They finally realize that ultimately it's the customer, be it a business customer or consumer, that's really in charge. So, you know, the appetite's there. So what you guys are doing, you're at the right place, I think, at the right time. When you guys are talking, maybe Brian, you could answer this. When you're talking to hiring managers, are they now talking more and more about culture and cultural change and bringing a digital first culture? Are you seeing any kind of patterns there?
Well, definitely. I mean, you look at the earnings season just now and a lot of the press releases that you're seeing about branches closing, 10%, 20% of branches. I just saw Investors Bank in New Jersey announce just recently that they're going to shuffle their branch network a little bit. And really, you think about what the culture and was the identifier for a bank was their branch.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can go back. Everyone talked about branches dying 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You know, they're still there. This is a watershed moment, and it trickles right into culture, where banks need to be looking at, you know, how they're going to bank the next generation of client. through electronic channels, through technological channels, through fintech partnerships. You've got a lot of banks in the middle of nowhere that really cannot grow. And right now, growth is like the last thing on the list. It's all reactive. So banks that are really trying to think progressively about fintech partnerships, if they can, get consumer loans from a different area well outside their region, that's a smart way to do it. What MVB did with Credit Karma, you go out and you grab a bunch of deposits, amazing, ideas there. And what Cross River did with Bricks Direct, raising however hundreds of millions it was in virtually 2 weeks, a week.
Yeah, it was
just
remarkable.
Amazing thought. It was. Yeah. And I do think it's still slow. There's 5,000 financial institutions out there. And how many are really progressively minded? 30?
Yeah.
15 even? I mean, but they're, little by little, I'm feeling it. A lot of the banks out there think they did enough on the technological side to change their culture. We're tech savvy because we got everyone mobile. All of our employees are working off site. And, we were able to, create a better delivery channel during this pandemic. It's just not enough, though. You have to be thinking about the future. Keith, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, it's exactly true. And being innovative and tech savvy, to me, and Brian, you brought it up before, was customer centric. Mm-hmm. You have to be customer centric. It's not what the bank wants. It's how the customer banks, what they're used to now. We're in that, kind of spoiled age of Amazon and Grubhub and everything's on demand. But the banks are sitting on so much data, over 50, 100 years of data, that they can make that customer journey and interact with their customer at a different level than any other institution that a customer really interacts with, any industry. Yep. They just have to be able to utilize that data, have the right skill set at the bank, talent, and partner with the right fintechs to really make banking, do I say badass? I mean, you could make it interactive, you could make it fun even, but it just takes that mindset that the customers are used to a different way of interacting with companies now. There's not many people walking into branches who are young or even older now, and giving them options on how they want to bank is so important.
And there was one thing, Brian, just to interject, I was talking to an investment banker yesterday. I think, again, banks, the culture of branches, you didn't want to be the bad guy to close a branch, but now you can actually close these branches and not be a villain. It's for operating expenses, this is the right thing to do. And I think everyone across the bank will agree with this. Mm-hmm. So it's a moment where, I think banks are going to redefine themselves.
Yeah. At the same time, though, you can't really cost cut yourself to prosperity, right? So, mm-hmm. as you close those branches, you're going to have to invest in retail delivery elsewhere. And getting back to what Keith was saying, data is the new currency. The financial institutions are sitting on, again, decades of data. The problem is they haven't turned it into actionable information. They aren't anticipating customer or member need in a way that they could, which actually would take some of the chore sting out of banking. Now, one of the things that you guys talk about on your website, which I really like, and I think I know where it comes from because I remember a guy named Vernon Hill at, what was the name of his bank? Commerce
now
Bank.
Republic First.
In South Jersey, right. So he talked a lot about franchise value. Now, you guys talk about that too. Maybe you could tell us, Brian, what is franchise value in your world?
Well, in our world, the way I look at it is, bringing talent to a bank that literally, increase. I joke when we make a placement, we might want to buy that bank stock because, that person is going to be a catalyst mm-hmm. for change and growth. In regular economies, everyone is trying to create shareholder value. Maybe there's an end game for acquisition. In this economy, it's shareholder or a franchise value is, a little bit tougher to think about. Mm-hmm. It's so reactive right now. But I guess that's my response in a nutshell.
Yeah, when I think of franchise value, I think of how consumers, business and retail consumers, kind of how they interpret that value of that franchise. Right? Are you sought after? If you were to franchise, let's say, a branch location, would you guarantee the market return to the franchisees? Right? Because franchises are pitched as someone who sold his shares in a company a year ago. I get these franchise guys calling me all the time. They're like, "Hey, you probably have some cash. You want to buy a Jack in the Box or whatever it is."
A cheesesteak place, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, down here that might work.
In Virginia.
With the real thing. I'm thinking Pat's though myself. Maybe Pat's of Philadelphia. Maybe Jim's, Steve's. I mean, there's some good ones up there.
I'm a Geno's guy.
Are you Geno's?
Yeah.
Geno's is good.
Can't be both. Can't be both Pat's and Geno's.
It's hard to go wrong with a Philadelphia cheesesteak, a real Philadelphia cheesesteak. So when you guys are working with, tell me a little about some of the clients you're working with. Any clients that you really want to showcase, and tell me a little about the kind of engagement you have going on with them.
Yeah. First that comes to mind is Quantic Bank.
Quantic.
Yeah, we've developed a very good relationship with Patrick Sells. There, he was on our webinar. He was Digital Banker of the Year.
Yep.
Another client that comes to mind for me personally is Kearney Bank in North Jersey. They are the ones that I was talking about. They're investing. They're looking to bring in new talent. I helped them place a director of data analytics. I think he was 40 under 40 for independent banker last year. So they get it. They're moving in that direction. Brian, on the other hand, since he's been here a lot longer, he has a lot of clients he can talk about.
Yeah, well, there were, Town Bank in Virginia.
Oh yeah, they're highly regarded in this market.
They did a great job in PPP. We don't have any engagements with them right now. Things are a little bit more quiet on that front. But Center State, I mentioned, and of course their MOE with South State. We're hoping to get that jump started again once the dust settles from that merger. There's a great client of mine, actually great clients of ours up in the upper Midwest, in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, Investors Community Bank. They've been terrific. We've done multiple searches there with their CFO and their chief credit officer. Also, Bridgewater Bank in Minneapolis is a bank that I really cherish my relationship. Their COO, Mary Jane Crocker, is just tremendous. And that they're a branch light. They're very, very entrepreneurial. We did their CTO search, and we actually got a gentleman. He was at Bremer Bank for a little while, but before that, he was at FICO. So he's got a very shrewd marketing mind, and he's really making some waves over there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I know all those banks you mentioned a little bit, Bremer especially. You guys ought to look at Atlantic Union down here in Richmond, about $20 billion in assets. I think they're looking to make some changes. They hired a new head of product from Santander. Before that, she was at Regions. She just brought in a lieutenant from Regions. They are going to be going someplace. I have a pretty long-term relationship with them. So we're gonna wind up with a question for both of you or either of you. What are some of the fintech or FinServe brands that aren't clients you guys really admire, and why? And I'll start with Keith.
Sure. I actually just had a call yesterday, a Zoom call, or earlier this week with Nathaniel Harley at Mantle. They partnered with Cross River. They partnered with Quantic. And what he is doing is amazing. It's just that entrepreneurial, let's take on kind of that David versus Goliath mentality. And we were both on the same page. We both said, as I mentioned before, we want to give these banks a fighter's chance against the Bank of Americas and the Citibanks. And what Mantle is doing with online deposit opening, using data analytics to help with operational efficiencies, and making it very easy to plug it into your existing core, because that can be a barrier to entry right there.
Yeah, huge barrier.
Huge barrier. So I was very interested to learn from Nathaniel that their systems work with the Jack Henrys and the Fiservs of the world. And when you have that just makes a big difference. To me, we could talk about core for 6 hours. But
we'd put everyone asleep if we talked about core for 6 hours.
We would. It wouldn't be badass banking if we talked about core. But Nimbus, Encino, That's another big one that just went public down in Wilmington.
They're having a good
They're
year.
very impressive. Plaid, of course, that was purchased by Visa. Radius, we actually talked with Chris Tremont about 2 months ago. He's super busy because they're working with or being acquired by Lending Club. So that was the first. Brian and I couldn't believe it at the beginning of the year, back in February and January. We're like, wow, this is going to be a record year for M&A. It's just, look at these deals happening.
Yeah.
And everything just, boom, stopped mid-March or early March.
There have been a couple of deals. There have been a couple deals announced over the last couple of weeks. There's a credit union deal I saw announced yesterday or today. I was actually surprised. He actually called it an acquisition, which you don't hear credit unions speak of often.
Well, and Bridge and Dime was a fairly big one in the Northeast.
Yeah. Well, in the Northeast, I expect they're going to need to do it. I mean, they've got a lot of challenges, I think, in the Northeast, New Jersey included in that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brian, any brands that really shine in your mind, other than the Mantles and some of the ones that Keith just mentioned?
Well, one bank that I'm hoping that we have a partnership with in the future is MVB. I mentioned them earlier. I'm just in awe of that bank and some of the things that they're doing. Again, West Virginia, finite geography, and they've got, really progressive minds behind the scenes there. So that's one bank. Since I'm Mr. Community Bank, I like to kind of shine the light on the banks that are really, changing the game. And that's one of them. Lincoln Savings, of course, is a bank that I admire. I know their COO from her previous bank. I had done engagements with her. And even, the ones that are in these kind of, strange geographies, Iowa, the Dakotas, Choice Financial. Keith and I had a great call with Brian Johnson a couple months ago. And just to go back to your first question, risk and compliance, but also fintech is the holy grail of a candidate right now.
Yeah.
Someone who can circumnavigate all those, arms along with banking regulation is what everyone's looking for. And, Keith and I have done a good job kind of keeping tabs on some good candidates there.
Yep. And I'll send you some candidates too. I'm talking to a lot of people right now. It's kind of fun. Listen, I really appreciate your time today. And it's good to know that there are people out there like you guys that are really trying to push the agenda of what Badass Banking is about, which is that intersection of fintech and FinServe, ultimately to drive a better customer experience. I'm going to put all your contact info below. Keith, I think I have a link to the presentation you guys did a couple weeks ago. You put it on YouTube. If I can find it, I'll drop that into the comments as well.
Thank you so much.
I think people would like to see that. It was really good. But I appreciate you guys being here. For those of you watching, reach out to these guys and know what they're talking about. I'm also going to remind everybody, please like or comment or dislike everything I'm doing here. It's about engagement. I'm trying to help drive a little change in the industry and bring good people together that are trying to make a difference. So guys, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And let's hear it for the Phillies, okay?
If they return.
If they survive.
I'm a Mets fan, Brian. Mets fan, Brian. Yeah, unfortunately.
With that, we're going to have to end the recording.
Thanks,
now.
Brian.